Hello everyone, with Diluc's new skin, Diluc's popularity has risen almost to that of the launch of Genshin. New and veteran players are interested in him and building him, so with such great interest on Diluc, I want to cover a very important aspect of Diluc that's not spoken enough, that being his teams. For Diluc to shine, he needs a team to support him and his kit, and the teams I will be recommending do just that, all while being really fun. I'll go into the rotation of these teams step by step, the builds for the characters used, and alternate characters to play in the teams. So let's begin. The first team, and currently my favorite team with Diluc, is what I like to call the Perma-Vape Diluc team. With both Yelan and Xingqiu, a huge amount of damage is dealt passively with their bursts, and enemies are virtually always affected by Hydro. This allows Diluc to ignore reaction timing and basically go Unga Bunga mode, literally performing as much attacks as possible, all while vaporizing. This also includes his burst. Normally Diluc's burst is actually a hindrance since Diluc's normal attacks will be infused with Pyro, which can mess up reactions, but because enemies are constantly affected by Hydro, Diluc's burst is actually really useful here. It will deal huge initial damage and give Diluc increased Pyro damage, and allow him to perform Pyro attacks beyond his skill. Bennett brings the team together by providing energy to the team and greatly increasing the damage of Xingqiu and Diluc. The rotation of this team is to first cast Yelan and Xingqiu's burst, then cast Bennett's burst, attack once with Bennett to apply Hydro to the enemy, and then quickly switch to Diluc and use his burst, then perform his skill while normal attacking in between each skill, so Yelan and Xingqiu's burst can deal damage and reapply Hydro. Use their skills until both of their bursts are back, and then repeat the rotation from the beginning. For the characters' builds, you want them in their normal builds. Bennett can use a weapon with a high base attack, but I'd only recommend to use a high base attack weapon if he can get his burst back quickly. If not, it'd be best to use an energy recharge weapon so the team's rotations are smooth and no damage is lost with Bennett trying to get his burst back. Lastly, try to run an EM Sands on Diluc, as with Bennett, Diluc will have so much attack that an EM Sands will deal more damage. It's not a big deal if you only have an attack percentage goblet, the team still performs well, but it is best to have an EM Sands. I'll quickly go over alternative characters. If you're missing one of the Hydro sub DPSs I mentioned, let's say Yelan for example, you can replace her with either Mona or burst support Ayato. The two I mentioned will likely not work as well as Yelan will, but they can still get the job done. You can also use an animal support and transfuse their burst with Hydro to make up for the lack of another Hydro sub DPS. If you're going with this route, when you begin a battle, first use Xingqiu's skill, then swirl Hydro through your animal support's burst, and then cast Xingqiu's burst. Kazuha is the best to fulfill this role with his elemental damage buffing and his burst occurring at ground level. Sucrose is a great alternative to Kazuha, especially if she's C6. At C6 she'll grant 20% elemental damage bonus like Kazuha, and her swirling occurs also on the ground, so she's a very good replacement. Venti can sort of be an alternative. He's not as good of an option since his burst brings enemies too high in the air to actually hit. For Bennett though, you really should use him in this team. If you must, you can replace him with Toma. Some of you may be cringing. Hear me out, hear me out. Toma is of course no Bennett, but he can provide enough benefits and utility to the team to where he can act as a pretty good alternative. Toma will protect Diluc and will increase Diluc's attack through the Pyro Resonance by using Noblesse Oblige and his C6 if any of you are lucky enough to have it. And don't worry about Toma stealing Diluc's Vaporizes. With both Yelan and Xingqiu, their Hydro application is so good that this rarely happens, if at all. If you're using Toma, the rotation is the same, but whenever I mention Bennett, you simply use his skill and burst. The next team is a meld team having two cryo characters. These two will allow the team to benefit from the cryo resonance and apply a good amount of cryo, allowing Diluc to easily melt, while Bennett will significantly boost everyone's damage. Team's rotation starts with Bennett's burst, then switch to Kaya and cast first his skill, then his burst. Switch to Rosaria and do the same, then switch to Diluc and use his skill while normal attacking in between his skills so the enemy can be affected with cryo. Once all of Diluc's skills are used, normal attack again and then use his burst for a big melt hit. Now use Kaya and Rosaria's skill to regain their burst. Lastly, use Bennett's skill to get his burst back and then rinse and repeat. For the characters' builds, build Kaya and Rosaria as burst DPSs. The artifacts they should be using is either 4-piece Emblem of Severed Fate, 2 Noblesse and 2 Blizzard Strayer, or 2 Noblesse and 2 Gladiator. You want them to have a good amount of energy recharge so they can regain their burst quickly. A great way to do this is to have one of them run a Favonius weapon, but for specific energy recharge numbers, aim to have around 150% on Kaya. A great weapon to use on him is the Amenoma Kagayuchi. This sword fits great with him and will allow him to gain high energy while not sacrificing his attack. For Rosaria, have around 175% energy.
For alternatives, the only interchangeable characters is Kaya and Rosaria, and you can replace them with either Ganyu or Aloy. These two will be burst sub DPS, so you can give them the artifacts I recommended for Kaya and Rosaria. The next team is a Monopyro team. Despite the fact that no one talks about Monopyro, this team is actually really strong. Everyone utilizes the huge buffs from Bennett and Kazuha, and since there's 3 Pyro characters, everyone gets their burst back reliably, so the DPS of this team is high. To start the rotation, begin with Bennett's burst, followed by Kazuha swirling Pyro with his burst, then use Kazuha's skill, a tap or hold is fine, then switch to Xiangling, cast her burst, and drop Guoba. Switch to Diluc, use his burst, and finish off the rotation with Diluc's skill, performed with normal attacks. After this, use Bennett and Kazuha's skill. When both of their bursts are back, you can repeat this rotation. For the characters' builds, have Diluc run 2-piece Crimson and 2-piece Gladiator with an attack goblet. 4-piece Crimson, which isn't really useful here as there will be no reactions performed, so for all of the Pyro characters, avoid having EM. For Diluc's weapons, use any high attack or crit weapons, so weapons such as the Wolf's Gravestone, the Serpent Spine, and the Luxurious Sea Lord. For Bennett, since there will be a lot of Pyro particles produced in the team, he's not going to need as much energy recharge, so I'd recommend to give him a high base attack weapon. For Xiangling, she still does somewhat struggle with energy, so I'd recommend to still give her high ER, so anything above 200. I also recommend having one character use a Favonius weapon. I've personally given Kazuha the Favonius sword, so Xiangling can deal more damage. This team falls apart without Bennett, so the only replaceable character is Kazuha and Xiangling. For Kazuha, once again, his best replacement is Sucrose, and if you can't use her, you can use any other animal support. Lastly, for Xiangling, you can replace her with sub DPS Klee or sub DPS Toma. Toma won't be as good as Klee in terms of dealing damage, but you can say that he makes up the lack of damage for the utility and buffing he brings. And those are all the teams I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed and gained from the video. I hope you try these teams out. To those that do, please let me know, what do you think of these teams? Do you think they're strong? Do you think they could be improved? And how do you think these teams compare to the teams you already use Diluc in? For those that are interested, you can watch my Diluc guide. Aside from his new skin, the guide is up to date and you can watch it in the pinned card above. Anyways, as always, thank you very much for watching and take care.